The unexpected war. The skies over Earth were clear, untouched by the chaos that would soon unfold. It was an ordinary day for humanity, with people going about their daily lives, completely unaware of the massive threat that was heading their way. News outlets were covering typical stories, politics, celebrity gossip, and global issues that seemed far away. No one knew that in the depths of space, a deadly species had already set its eyes on Earth, planning to conquer it with ease. They believed humanity was weak, defenseless, and unaware of the dangers lurking in the universe. The aliens, known as the Vrox, were an advanced, highly intelligent species. Their technology surpassed anything Earth had ever seen. They had been traveling the stars for centuries, conquering planet after planet, wiping out civilizations and claiming new worlds as their own. The Vrox were proud of their technological prowess and the power that came with it. They believed themselves to be superior, above all other species in the galaxy. The Vrox scouts first saw Earth from a distance, observing from their hidden space station in the dark void. They were curious but dismissive, scanning the planet from afar. Their advanced sensors detected no signs of major weapons or technologies that could pose a threat. Earth had no space fleets, no superweapons, no advanced military, at least not by their standards. They made their decision quickly. Earth would be easy to conquer, a simple task. "They are primitive," their leader, Commander Zaylor, said in his cold, calculating voice. "They have no weapons to stop us. We will take their planet without resistance." With this, the Vrox set their plan into motion. They activated their warships, which were massive dark ships that could rip through the fabric of space itself. Their arrival would be swift and terrifying. They would destroy any city that resisted and enslave the human race, using them as labor for their empire. As the Vrox ships entered Earth's orbit, the world's defense systems were activated, but they were no match for the alien technology. Anti-aircraft missiles were launched, but they exploded harmlessly against the force fields around the alien ships. Fighter jets took to the skies, but their weapons were ineffective, bouncing off the Vrox's advanced shields. Cities were soon under attack, with fire raining down from above. Panic spread like wildfire. Humans had never seen anything like this before. The first waves of destruction hit without warning, and chaos quickly followed. Governments tried to organize counterattacks, but they were hopelessly outmatched. People screamed in fear, but there was nothing they could do. The world was crumbling before their eyes. In the midst of this chaos, something unexpected happened. On the outskirts of a small town in North America, a group of survivors huddled together in the basement of an old farmhouse. They were ordinary people, not soldiers or warriors, just regular citizens who had found refuge from the rain of fire falling from the sky. Among them was a man named Robert. He wasn't anything special, just a mechanic by trade, but his heart beat with a deep primal instinct. His hands were calloused from years of work and his mind was sharp, focused. Robert had seen what the Vrox had done to his town, and he had lost his family in the chaos. As the days passed, more survivors joined the group. Some were soldiers, others were just everyday people like Robert. But one thing united them all: a will to survive. They couldn't just let their world be destroyed without fighting back. They started working together, gathering supplies and forming a plan. Robert quickly rose to a leadership role, organizing people and using his mechanic skills to create basic weapons out of everyday objects. They needed to make every scrap of technology and every resource they had count. The Vrox may have thought that humans were weak, but they didn't know what made humanity truly dangerous: its ability to adapt. Humans had survived through war, famine, and even natural disasters. But now they faced a threat from the stars, and they would do whatever it took to protect their home. As Robert looked out from the farmhouse's small window, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of defiance. They may have had no advanced technology, no space fleets, but there was something humanity possessed that the Vrox had underestimated: their natural will to survive. The Vrox didn't understand that humans had something even more powerful than technology: the raw primal instinct to fight for their lives. They think they can just take us down. Robert muttered under his breath, his voice full of determination. They have no idea what they're dealing with. In that moment, Robert and his group made a pact. They would not go down without a fight. They would fight back, not with advanced technology or alien weapons, but with something far older, far more dangerous, their strength, their courage, and their teeth. It was the beginning of the resistance. The Varroks had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity, not just as a species but as a force of nature. Soon, they would realize that there were weapons they could never have predicted, weapons that were born in the hearts of human beings. And so, the war began, not with advanced lasers or bombs, but with something simpler, something far more terrifying. The rage and fury of a species fighting for its survival, the teeth of the beast. The resistance was born out of the most unlikely of circumstances. It wasn't an organized military force, nor did they have advanced tech or weapons at their disposal. They had only their resourcefulness, their will to survive, and something the Varroks had never counted on: the raw, unyielding strength of human resolve. The survivors huddled in the makeshift base they had set up in the farmhouse. The house itself had once been a symbol of peace and quiet, but now it was a fortress, its walls covered in crude maps, hand-drawn schematics, and makeshift weapons. Robert, their unofficial leader, stood in front of the small group of survivors, who had come together from all walks of life. Soldiers, engineers, farmers, and students, they had all joined for one reason: to fight back. "I know we're outmatched," Robert said, his voice steady but filled with a fire that had been missing in the early days of the invasion. "But what the Varroks don't understand is that we don't need their technology. We've got something they don't, our survival instinct, and they've made the mistake of underestimating us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Robert paced around the room, a map of the nearby town stretched out on the table in front of him. The Varroks had taken over most of the major cities, their ships hovering menacingly in the sky, but Robert had a plan. They couldn't defeat the aliens directly, not yet anyway. But they could strike at their weak points. They could hit and run, use guerrilla tactics, and most importantly, they could use the one thing the Varroks had never considered: the unpredictability of humans. "We may not have advanced weapons, but we have something far more powerful," Robert continued. "We have something the Varroks can't replicate, can't understand. We have the will to fight and the ability to adapt." A woman named Sarah, a former biology teacher, stood up from the corner where she had been quietly observing. Her eyes were bright with determination. "You're right," she said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "Humans have faced extinction before, but we've always found a way to survive. We know how to work with what we have to make it our own. We've got something inside us that no alien technology can predict." Robert looked at her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Exactly, but we need to be smart. The Varroks think they can just wipe us out without a second thought. They think we're defenseless, but they haven't seen what we're capable of." He paused, then turned to the group. "We're going to start small, disrupt their supply lines, take out their scouts, cause enough chaos that they start questioning their assumptions. But we can't do it alone. We need to get the word out, rally as many people as we can." The plan was simple, but dangerous. They couldn't afford to be reckless. Every move had to be calculated. Robert and Sarah would lead a small team to sabotage the Varroks' communications network, while others would spread the word and build more resistance cells across the region. But the real challenge was yet to come. The Varroks were everywhere, watching, waiting for any signs of human retaliation. They wouldn't take kindly to any form of resistance. As night fell over the farmhouse, Robert sat alone, looking out into the darkened fields. The air was thick with the tension of what was to come. He couldn't stop thinking about the Varroks' arrogance, how they had assumed they could come to Earth and conquer it with no resistance. He knew the aliens had their own agenda, but there was one thing they didn't understand. Humans were not just a species, they were a force. In the distance, the hum of a Varrock ship could be heard, its engines a low, menacing growl. Robert clenched his fists. the anger within him burning hotter. The Varroks thought they could wipe out humanity with their advanced technology, their ships, their weapons. But they had forgotten something crucial. They had forgotten about the most basic, most primal weapon humans had at their disposal, the drive to protect their home. It wasn't about technology, not really. It wasn't about having the most advanced weapons. The real power of humanity lay in its ability to adapt, to fight against impossible odds, and most importantly, to survive. The Varroks had never seen the true strength of humanity. They hadn't realized that even without technology, humans had the one thing that could turn the tide of any battle: their instinct. They were survivors. And when cornered, when there was no other choice, humanity would show the Varroks that their natural weapons were not the sharpest tools in the galaxy. The next morning, Robert gathered the team. They were ready. Their plan was set, and the time had come to make their first move. He could see it in their eyes. They were scared, yes, but more than that, they were ready to fight. And the Varroks would soon learn the hard truth. Humanity was not as weak as they thought. "Remember," Robert said, his voice steady, "we're not here to win this war today. We're here to make them afraid. We're here to show them that we're not going to go down without a fight." The group nodded, and with that they set out toward their first target, a Vrok supply ship, grounded near the town's outskirts. It was heavily guarded, but it was also the perfect opportunity to strike back, to show the Vroks what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. And so, the war began in earnest with the most unlikely of weapons: human resolve, human ingenuity, and a deep, unbreakable will to survive. The Varroks had forgotten one simple thing. They had no idea that the most dangerous weapon on Earth wasn't their advanced tech or alien armies. It was humanity itself. Strike at the heart. The dawn broke, casting a pale light over the ruins of the once thriving town. The smell of burning wood and metal still lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the destruction the Vrocks had already wrought. It wasn't just the physical damage that hurt the most. It was the sense of helplessness, of watching a planet be torn apart by a force they couldn't even comprehend. Yet as Robert and his team made their way toward their target, there was a flicker of something else in the air: hope. The Vrocks may have thought they were unbeatable, but humanity had proven time and time again that they could defy the odds. The Vrok supply ship lay ahead, half buried in the overgrown grass at the edge of the town. Its dark metallic hull gleamed under the weak morning sun, sleek and menacing. Despite its size and formidable appearance, there was something about it that seemed vulnerable to those who knew how to strike. And Robert's group knew exactly what they had to do. "Stay low and stay quiet," Robert whispered to the others, his voice sharp with urgency. "We hit fast, we hit hard, and we get out before they even realize what happened." Sarah was next. To him, her eyes focused on the ship. "We've got one shot at this. If we screw up, they'll bring reinforcements and we'll be sitting ducks. We need to be smart, not reckless." The team, a small but determined group, nodded in agreement. There were 6 of them in total, each one wearing scavenged gear, from body armor pieced together from old military uniforms to homemade explosives tucked into backpacks. They were far from professional soldiers, but they had something more important: their desire to protect their homes, their families, and their future. The plan was simple. They would approach the ship, disable its communication systems, and sabotage the engines. If they could take out this supply ship, they would cripple one of the Vroks' most vital supply lines. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It would send a message. The resistance was real and they weren't going to back down. As they approached the supply ship, Robert's heart raced. Every instinct screamed that they were too exposed, too vulnerable, but there was no turning back now. The mission had to succeed. They crept forward, ducking behind debris and ruined buildings, keeping their heads down. Their steps were quiet, measured, each one bringing them closer to the ship. When they reached the perimeter, Sarah took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of the Vrok's guards. "2 at the entrance," Sarah muttered under her breath. "1 on the left side and 2 more patrolling along the back. We can take them out quietly, but we have to move fast. Robert nodded. "We take out the two by the entrance first. I'll deal with the one on the left. You guys cover the back." The group nodded in agreement, and then, like shadows, they moved into action. One of the survivors, a former soldier named Greg, took the first shot. With a swift motion, he threw a silenced dart into the back of one of the Virox sentries, and the guard crumpled silently to the ground. The team moved quickly, neutralizing the other guard at the entrance in a flash, using their makeshift weapons: knives, blunt objects, even pipes. The Virox guards never stood a chance. They were slow to react, their advanced technology failing to compensate for the speed and unpredictability of humans. "All clear," Greg whispered, and Robert gave a quick nod of approval. Now that they had neutralized the exterior defenses, it was time to move inside. The ship's entrance was a massive hatch that required a complex key code to open. But that was no problem for Sarah, who had spent hours studying the ship's technology and hacking the interface using her knowledge of alien systems. "It's almost done," she said, her voice calm but focused. "Just a few more seconds." The seconds felt like an eternity. Robert could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, the tension thickening with every passing moment. If they didn't move fast, they'd be spotted, and the Virox would call in their reinforcements. But finally, the hatch slid open with a low hiss. The group entered the ship, moving quickly and silently through the narrow corridors. Inside, the ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. The walls were smooth, metallic, glowing faintly with alien energy. It was both beautiful and terrifying, the epitome of advanced technology. And yet, in the midst of all this, the humans remained calm, determined to complete their mission. They reached the engine room first. It was a vast, open space filled with alien machinery. The humming of the engines vibrated through the floor, a constant reminder of the power that the Virox wielded. Robert glanced around, taking in the layout of the room. "Set the charges," he ordered. The team moved quickly, placing explosives on the critical components of the engine. They were simple devices, fashioned out of scavenged materials, but they would do the job. They didn't need to destroy the whole ship. They just needed to disable it long enough to cause disruption. Once the explosives were set, they quickly moved toward the communications hub. Sarah was already ahead, working on hacking the system to sever the Virox's ability to coordinate their forces. Her fingers flew over the alien interface, bypassing layers of encryption and security. "Almost there," Sarah muttered. Just as she completed the hack, a loud screech echoed through the ship. The alarms blared to life. The Virox had detected their presence. "We need to move, now," Robert barked. They didn't need to be told twice. The group ran through the ship's corridors, heading back to the exit. The Virox were coming, their footsteps heavy, their weapons primed. As they reached the hatch, Robert heard the unmistakable sound of heavy boots pounding behind them. They were too close now. "Go," he shouted. The team sprinted toward the exit. Just as the ship's alarm system reached a fever pitch, they could hear the Virox shouting orders, scrambling to contain the damage. But it was too late. The charges went off with a deafening roar, sending a shockwave through the ship. The lights flickered and the ground beneath them shook. The group ran, barely making it out of the hatch just as the explosion tore through the ship, sending a ball of fire and debris into the air. The shockwave threw them off their feet, but they didn't stop. They picked themselves up and ran, knowing that they had completed the mission. As they disappeared into the cover of the trees, the Virox ship continued to burn in the distance. Their first victory was small, but it was theirs, and it was only the beginning. The resistance had made its mark, and now the Virox would know that humanity was not as weak as they had believed. There would be no easy conquest of Earth, because humanity had something that no alien force could ever conquer: the sheer will to fight, no matter the odds. The tide turns. The aftermath of their victory was both exhilarating and humbling. For a moment, Robert and the survivors allowed themselves to breathe, to soak in the reality of what they had achieved. They had struck at the heart of the Virox forces, and although the destruction of the supply ship was just a small blow in the grand scheme of things, it was a message that they were not going to be easy prey. The Viroks were not infallible. They could be hurt and humanity could fight back, but the victory was fleeting. As the fire from the burning supply ship lit up the sky in the distance, Robert knew this was only the beginning. The Viroks wouldn't just sit back and let this go unanswered. There was a storm coming, and the survivors had no illusion that they were safe. The Viroks would retaliate, and their response would be swift and merciless. After regrouping in the farmhouse, Robert called a meeting. The survivors had gathered once again, a mix of fear and excitement painted across their faces. The plan had worked, but the cost of success was unknown. The Viroks had been humiliated, but they would not forget. "We've made our move," Robert said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Now, the Viroks will be looking for us. They'll come down hard, and we need to be ready for what comes next." Sarah, the former biology teacher turned strategist, was the first to speak up. "We have to assume they'll retaliate with full force. They'll target the heart of the resistance, wipe out any cells they find. We need to be scattered, harder to find, and we need more people." Greg, the former soldier, grimaced. "That's easier said than done. Our victory today might have sent a message, but it also means we've painted a target on our backs. We're not ready for a full-scale war." Robert nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know, but we don't have the luxury of waiting. We need to keep fighting, and we need to spread the word. We need every willing human on this planet to understand what's happening. If we don't start a global resistance, we'll be isolated and picked off one by one." He looked at each person in the room, their faces filled with uncertainty but also a flicker of hope. He could see it now, more clearly than ever. The resistance wasn't just about fighting the Viroks. It was about uniting humanity in a way that had never been done before. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future. That night, Robert and Sarah worked late planning their next move. They knew that striking at the heart of the Viroks' infrastructure again could lead to more destruction, but it also had the potential to cripple their operations further. The supply ship they had destroyed wasn't the only one. The Viroks had a network of ships across the planet. If they could take out just a few more, they could slow the invaders down and buy humanity more time. But time was running out. The Virok ships in the sky had begun to swarm like hornets, and Robert could feel their presence growing stronger. It was a matter of days, maybe hours, before they began their retaliation. They had to act fast. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "The Viroks don't just come here to conquer. They need our resources. They're not just here for land, they're here for what we can give them: minerals, energy, the things that Earth has that they don't. If we can sabotage their resource supply lines, we can hurt them where it matters most." Robert paused, considering this new angle. "You think if we hit their mining operations, it'll be enough?" "It'll be a start," Sarah replied, her eyes alight with determination. "The Viroks are relying on Earth's resources to fuel their ships, their weapons. If we take that away, we take away their power. We don't need to defeat them head-on. We need to disrupt their supply chain, force them to spread their forces thin." Greg stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "It's dangerous, but it might just work. If we can hit several key sites in one go, it'll cause confusion. The Viroks aren't used to this kind of warfare. They think they can control everything, but we can make them realize they don't." The idea was risky, but Robert could see it was their best chance. They would target the Viroks' resource mining facilities, several of them located in remote, heavily guarded locations. It would be a difficult mission, and the stakes were high. If they were successful, they would disrupt the Viroks' ability to maintain their invasion forces. If they failed, the retaliation would be brutal. "We move tomorrow," Robert said. "The decision final. Everyone get some rest. We'll hit them hard, and we'll hit them fast." As the survivors dispersed, Robert took a moment to reflect. He had never imagined his life would come to this. 1 year ago, he was just a mechanic living a quiet life. Now he was leading a resistance against an alien invasion. But through all the fear and uncertainty, he felt something else too. A deep, unwavering determination. Humanity had been pushed to the brink. But as long as there was breath in their lungs, they would never give up. The Viroks had thought they were the masters of the universe. They had underestimated humans, and now they would pay the price. The following day, as the sun set over the ruins of the world they once knew, Robert and his team prepared for the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. The Vrox might have their advanced weapons and technology, but the humans had something else, something far more dangerous. They had a reason to fight, and that was all they needed. The heart of darkness. The plan had been set into motion, but as dawn broke, the next morning, Robert felt a creeping sense of dread gnawing at him. The mission ahead was bold, risky, and filled with uncertainty. They were going up against one of the most powerful forces in the universe, a species that had conquered countless worlds, leaving nothing in their wake but destruction. But they had no choice. The Vrox had shown no mercy, and they would never offer any. If humanity was to have any chance of survival, they had to strike now. The survivors gathered in the farmhouse one last time before they set out. Robert could feel the tension thick in the air. Everyone knew the stakes. No one spoke, but the unspoken thoughts were clear. Failure meant the Vrox would track them down and wipe them out without hesitation. Success meant they could cripple the alien war machine and give humanity a fighting chance. "Remember," Robert said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity, "we're hitting multiple targets at once. The Vrox will be caught off guard, but we don't have long before they realize what's happening. We hit fast, disable their operations, and then we vanish." Greg, the soldier, nodded. "Keep your heads down and don't get greedy. In and out. That's all we need." "Exactly," Robert replied. He turned to Sarah, who had been doing most of the strategizing. "Are we ready?" Sarah's face was a mixture of determination and quiet confidence. "We've got everything we need. The sabotage charges are set, and we've mapped out the quickest escape routes. If we hit these sites simultaneously, they won't know where to focus their retaliation." Robert nodded, then looked around the room at the faces of the resistance. Each one of them had risked everything to fight back. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, each with their own reason for being there, for putting everything on the line. Whether it was family, friends, or the belief that Earth was worth saving, they were united by something greater than fear. "Let's go," he said. The mission began with a tense, quiet march. Their targets were scattered across the country, each hidden away in remote areas where the Vrox had set up mining operations to extract the rare minerals they needed to fuel their war machines. These operations were heavily guarded, and each facility was protected by Vrox patrols, automated defenses, and surveillance systems. But the resistance had done their homework, and they knew how to use the terrain to their advantage. The first target was a mining facility buried deep in a mountain range, a place so well hidden that it had remained off the Vrox's radar for most of the war. The team moved silently through the dense woods, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were close now. Sarah led the way, her eyes scanning the area, reading the terrain as if it was second nature. She had mapped out the location of the facility's weak points and identified the best place to plant their explosives. "Stay low and don't make a sound," she whispered. "We get in, plant the charges, and get out. Quick and quiet." The team spread out, moving like shadows between the trees, approaching the base from an angle that would avoid detection. They could hear the low hum of the mining equipment in the distance, but it was muffled by the thick forest. Robert's heart raced. They were close now. They had to strike before the Vrox noticed them. "Ready?" Robert whispered. "Ready," Greg responded, his voice calm and sure. He gripped his rifle tightly, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Sarah led them to the edge of the facility, where the mountain face opened up to reveal a hidden entrance. It was heavily guarded, but Sarah had already figured out a way in. She gestured to Greg and the others. "We take out the guards first," she said. "Once that's done, we plant the charges on the main generators." With the precision of a well-oiled machine, the team moved in. Greg and Robert took out the guards quietly, moving swiftly and silently. They had trained for this, and every step was calculated. The two sentries were no match for their speed and efficiency. With the perimeter secured, Sarah quickly set to work on the generator. She worked fast, her hand steady as she placed the explosive charges, connecting them to a detonator. 5 minutes, she said as she finished. Let's go, Robert said, and they retreated into the forest, their movements swift and practiced. The second target was an old industrial facility near the coast, a key Virox operation that processed energy from Earth's natural resources. This one was more heavily guarded, with automated defense drones flying overhead. But it was nothing the team couldn't handle. Again, they moved swiftly. Robert's mind raced as he led them through the wilderness, keeping track of time and avoiding patrols. The charges were placed, and they had completed the mission without detection. They weren't finished yet, though. The Virox would soon realize that their mining operations were being sabotaged. The Resistance had only one more target to hit before they would have to disappear and regroup. The final mission was a high-security Virox outpost located on a barren plain. This one would be their most difficult challenge, as the Virox had established a heavily fortified stronghold here. But Robert knew that if they didn't take it out, the Virox would have a solid base of operations to continue their conquest. It was time to go all in. As they approached the stronghold, Robert felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. They had one shot to cripple the Virox forces for good, and if they failed, it would mean the end of everything they had fought for. But he didn't have time to second-guess himself. The mission was clear. They moved into position, each member of the team knowing their role. They would have to get past the automated turrets, the security cameras, and the Virox's elite soldiers. It wouldn't be easy, but they had no choice. The Virox didn't know what was coming for them. The operation began with a bang. Robert, Sarah, Greg, and the rest of the team stormed the perimeter using every bit of cover they could find. Explosions rang out as the team breached the stronghold, and the Virox soldiers scrambled to defend their base. The sound of gunfire and the whir of alien technology filled the air as chaos erupted. For a moment, Robert felt like the world was spinning out of control. But then, amidst the smoke and confusion, he saw it. The central power core. It was their target. They needed to destroy it to disable the entire base. "Over here," Robert shouted, pointing to the massive energy source. They fought their way to the heart of the stronghold, dodging fire and taking down any Virox soldiers who got in their way. Time was running out. "Plant the charges," Robert barked. Sarah rushed forward, setting the explosives. But just as she finished, an alarm sounded. The Virox had found them. "Go, go, go," Greg shouted. The team sprinted toward the exit, the ground trembling beneath their feet as the charges went off. The explosion was massive. The entire stronghold shook as it crumbled in on itself. The Virox power core reduced to rubble. As the team made their escape, Robert felt a grim satisfaction. They had done it. They had crippled the Virox's operations. And although the war was far from over, humanity had just taken a massive step toward winning it. The Virox retaliation. The days following their attack were filled with uncertainty. Robert and the rest of the survivors had accomplished what no one thought possible. They had struck at the heart of the Virox Empire, destroying key resource facilities, disabling a major stronghold, and forcing the invaders into a defensive position. But the victory came at a cost. The Virox, as expected, did not take this attack lightly. The first signs of their retaliation came within hours. The skies, once filled with the low hum of Virox ships, now seemed to pulse with a deep foreboding. Silence. The calm before the storm. Robert knew that the Virox would not let this slip. They were organized, relentless, and their wrath would be swift. The survivors gathered again in the farmhouse, their faces drawn, weary from the strain of the past few days. They had fought hard, but the battle was far from over, and the Virox were coming for them. "We've hit them hard," Sarah said, her eyes grim as she reviewed their intel. "But they've been coordinating their forces. They've activated all their nearby warships. They're gathering a response fleet." Robert's mind raced. The Virox were powerful, and now they were angry. The retaliation would be merciless. They would send waves of ships, burn cities, hunt down every human in their path, and leave no stone unturned. "We have to go underground," Greg suggested, his voice steady but concerned. The Vrox will target every major population center. It's not just us they're after anymore. We've drawn attention. They'll scorch the earth to root us out. Robert agreed. The resistance had made an impact, but now it was time to disappear. They needed to go off the grid and form alliances with other human cells across the world, far from the Vrox's reach. We'll split up, Robert said, his voice firm. The Vrox won't know where we are if we go dark. We'll stay out of sight and keep working, building resistance from the ground up. We hit them hard in the shadows, not in the light. We can't just run, Sarah interjected, her eyes blazing with determination. We've disrupted their supply chains, but the Vrox are still here. They still have enough firepower to burn us all to the ground. If we hide, we're admitting defeat. We can't do that. Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room. The team had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to simply vanish. They needed a new plan, a way to strike back, and this time, they couldn't afford to just survive. They had to win. Robert took a deep breath, his mind swirling with thoughts. The Vrox were not just a threat to Earth, they were a threat to the entire galaxy, and the longer they stayed in control, the harder it would be to stop them. They needed something bigger, something more permanent. The destruction of their resources had caused a temporary setback, but it wasn't enough. Sarah's right, Robert said finally, his eyes narrowing with resolve. We need to do more. If we hit their command centers, their leadership, if we take them out, we take away the heart of their invasion. We'll cripple them for good. Greg frowned. That's the most dangerous thing we could do. The Vrox will retaliate like never before. If we go after their leadership, we'll be signing our own death warrants. We've already signed it, Robert replied quietly. We're all in this or we're not. There's no turning back now. The room went silent. Everyone understood the weight of his words. They had pushed this far, and they couldn't afford to stop now. But if they were to go after the Vrox leadership, it would be the most dangerous mission they'd ever undertaken. The hunt begins. Their target was the Vrox High Command, an impenetrable fortress located deep within one of Earth's remaining uncharted territories, a vast frozen wasteland in the north. No one had ever been inside the fortress, and no one knew what lay beyond its walls. But Robert and his team had gathered intel. There was a way in. They just had to find it. Sarah and Greg worked together, piecing together information from intercepted Vrox communications and scouting reports. The fortress was well defended, with powerful automated defenses, hundreds of elite soldiers, and advanced security systems that could obliterate anyone who dared approach. But the weakness they discovered was glaring. The Vrox command center had a small window of vulnerability during the planet's periodic solar flare. For a brief moment, the electromagnetic interference from the flare disrupted the Vrox's communication and security systems. That was their window. The plan was simple, but it had to be executed flawlessly. They would infiltrate the fortress. During the flare, neutralize the leadership and sabotage the base from within. They wouldn't be able to stay long. Once the flare passed, all systems would return to full functionality, and they would be trapped. Robert's heart raced as he reviewed the plan. It wasn't just about taking down the Vrox leadership. This was about sending a message that humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. The infiltration. They set out under the cover of night, knowing that every step brought them closer to their objective. The frozen landscape stretched out before them, endless and desolate. The wind howled, carrying with it the biting cold of the polar region. They had little time to waste. The solar flare would arrive soon, and the window of opportunity was shrinking by the minute. We're almost there, Sarah said, her voice tense as she scanned the horizon. The fortress came into view, a towering structure made of dark metal that gleamed coldly against the white expanse. It was an imposing sight, but Robert had no time to marvel at its scale. They had a job to do, and failure wasn't an option. The team moved like shadows, sticking to the terrain to avoid detection. They reached the outer walls of the fortress, where they planted EMP devices to disable the perimeter security. The air buzzed with static as the security grid flickered and went down. "Flares coming," Greg muttered, his breath visible in the cold air. "We need to move." They slipped through the weak spot in the security grid and into the belly of the beast. Inside, the fortress was like a tomb, cold, silent, and eerily still. The further they ventured, the more oppressive the silence became. Finally, they reached the heart of the fortress, the command center. It was a massive, high-tech room, with Vrock's commanders monitoring various screens and controlling the invasion. The leaders stood at the far end, surrounded by a group of armed guards. Their power was immense, but Robert knew that in the next few minutes it would all come crashing down. They moved quickly, silent as ghosts. Greg took out the guards first, while Sarah and Robert worked their way toward the Vrock's leadership. The plan was simple: disable, eliminate, and escape. But as they neared the leaders, Robert felt a cold, unsettling sensation crawl up his spine. Something wasn't right. The last stand. The tension in the command center was suffocating. Robert, Sarah, and Greg stood poised, their weapons drawn, moving with the practiced precision they had honed over countless battles. The Vrock's leadership was within reach, just across the vast room. Their advanced technology blinked ominously in the dim light, the air humming with energy. But something felt off, a gnawing sense of wrongness that Robert couldn't shake. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They couldn't afford to hesitate. The solar flare was approaching fast, and their narrow window to strike would soon close. Greg's voice was low, urgent. "We move now, or we lose it all." Without another word, Robert nodded, signaling the team to advance. They moved silently, their shadows dancing on the cold walls of the command center. The Vrock's leaders, unaware of their presence, continued to monitor the battlefield on their holographic screens, oblivious to the impending doom. The center of the room stood the Vrock's high commander, a massive figure cloaked in black, his face hidden beneath a dark helmet. He was flanked by his most trusted officers, each armed with alien weapons that could obliterate a human in seconds. Robert felt a chill run down his spine as he glanced at Sarah and Greg. They were close now. The mission was almost complete, but the unease in the pit of his stomach only grew stronger. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the room, sharp and clear. "You shouldn't have come." It was a voice unlike any they had heard before. Cold, calculating, and almost familiar. Before Robert could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. The Vrock's high commander lifted his helmet, revealing a face Robert never expected to see. It was human. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The figure before him was no Vrock's at all. It was a traitor, a human collaborator. "Impossible," Robert muttered, his mind racing. He could hardly believe his eyes. How are you here?" The man smiled, a cruel, almost amused smile, his eyes glinting with malice. "Oh, Robert, how naive you are. You think this is a war between humans and Vrock's? This is a war between those who understand and those who don't." Sarah's face twisted in disbelief. You betrayed us? You helped them destroy our world?" The traitor's smile widened. "I didn't betray anyone. I saw the truth. The Vrock's offered what humanity never could: power, knowledge, and the promise of survival. You were too blinded by your own ignorance to see it. You still think this is just about defending your home, but it's about evolution, Robert. The strong survive, and the weak perish. I'm simply on the winning side." The word struck like a slap. For a moment, Robert was paralyzed. How could one of their own betray them? How could someone who once shared their cause now stand with their enemies? "We've already won," the traitor continued, his voice oozing with confidence. "The Vrock's are already preparing for the final stage of the invasion. Your little resistance is a mere nuisance, nothing more. The destruction you've caused has only hastened your extinction." As the man spoke, the command center's doors slid shut with a mechanical hiss. The room was now sealed, and Robert's worst fear became a cold, cruel reality. They had walked right into a trap. "Get ready," Greg said, his voice tight with anger. He aimed his rifle at the traitor, his hands shaking, but Robert held up a hand to stop him. "Don't shoot," Robert muttered, his mind working furiously. "He's not the real problem. It's the Vurox, and they're still out there. We need to finish this." The traitor laughed darkly. "It's already too late. The Vurox are watching. Your little sabotage, it's over. We've taken control of your communications, your defenses, and the very heart of your resistance." He stepped closer, his voice lowering, dripping with contempt. "You were always too small, too weak to understand, but I'll let you see the truth before it's too late. The Vurox will reshape this world. You are nothing but ants underfoot." Robert felt a surge of anger, but more than that, he felt the weight of their failure. They had been played. They had done all of this, fought, sacrificed, and bled, only to walk straight into the Vurox's hands. Suddenly, the room around them started to hum, and a voice boomed through the loudspeakers, unmistakably the voice of the Vurox High Command. "Initiate the final sequence. Earth will burn. We will consume it." The ground shook beneath them as a massive mechanical sound filled the room. Robert's heart sank. The command center was rigged to self-destruct, and the Vurox had activated the countdown. The final phase of the invasion was imminent. "We have to stop this," Robert snapped, his voice hard with resolve. The traitor's smirk faded, replaced by an expression of amusement. "It's already too late. You can't stop what's already in motion. Earth's fate is sealed." As Robert's mind raced, Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "We don't need to stop the countdown. We need to take him down. If we kill the traitor, we'll disrupt their command chain. The Vurox can't function without their leadership." Greg nodded grimly. "He's the key. We kill him and the Vurox lose their leverage." Robert clenched his fists. There was no more time for hesitation. They had to end this now. He turned to Sarah and Greg. "We do it together. No mistakes." In a flurry of movement, the resistance team lunged at the traitor. He didn't expect the attack, and for a split second he was caught off guard. But the moment passed and the traitor drew his alien weapon. The air crackled as he fired, but Robert was faster. He dove toward the control panel, knocking the weapon from the traitors. Hands, Greg and Sarah were on him, overpowering him with precision and speed. The fight was brutal, but the traitor was no match for their combined fury. Finally, with a swift motion, Robert brought the traitor to the ground. His breath was heavy, his mind racing as he stared down at the once trusted comrade. "No one's winning this war today," Robert said, his voice cold. "Not you, not them." With that, Robert pressed the detonation button. The traitor's face twisted in disbelief as the control center's systems began to short-circuit, the countdown glitching before completely shutting down. The Vurox command had just lost its grip. The team stood in the silence that followed, sweat dripping from their brows, their breaths heavy. The traitor was dead. The countdown was stopped. For the first time in what felt like forever, Robert allowed himself a breath of relief. But the victory was only temporary. The war was far from over. There was still more to fight for. The dawn of a new hope. The command center fell eerily silent, the hum of its massive machinery now gone. The traitor lay motionless on the cold floor, the spark of betrayal extinguished with his life. The Vurox leadership was gone, and their once impenetrable fortress was now a crumbling symbol of their hubris. But as Robert stood there staring at the lifeless figure, he knew that this was only the beginning. The battle had taken a sharp turn, but the war was far from over. They had dealt a massive blow to the Vurox Empire, but the true scope of their retaliation was still unfolding. Earth wasn't safe yet. Far from it. The Vurox would regroup, adapt, and return. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Robert allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about victory. It was about reclaiming what was lost. Sarah and Greg approached him cautiously, their eyes still wide with the shock of their success. The realization that they had destroyed the Vurox command, eliminated their leadership, and disabled their advanced military systems was sinking in. "Did we really just do that?" Sarah asked, her voice breathless. "We did," Greg confirmed, shaking his head in disbelief. They're not in charge anymore. We took their heart out. Robert nodded, his mind still processing the enormity of it all. But this doesn't mean the war is over. The Vurox won't go down quietly. They'll strike back harder than ever. We need to use this time to strike at their remaining forces, to finish what we've started. A heavy silence followed. Each member of the resistance understood the weight of Robert's words. They couldn't rest. Not yet. The world outside was still on the brink of annihilation. We've hit them, at their core, Sarah said, her voice steady now, determination flooding back into her. But now we need to turn the tide for good. The people will rally. We've proven that humanity can fight back. We can win this. Greg nodded in agreement. We have to go global now. Every major resistance cell must know what we did here. They'll see that the Vurox can be beaten. Robert felt a rush of adrenaline. It was happening. The world was waking up. The spark had been lit, and humanity was beginning to rise from the ashes of their subjugation. We'll divide and conquer, Robert said. Every resistance group, every cell we've built, every ally we've made, we need them all. We'll cripple their remaining bases, destroy their fleets, and bring down the Vurox war machine once and for all. Where do we start? Sarah asked. Everywhere, Robert said firmly. We strike them where it hurts most, their resources, their supply chains, their remaining command centers. They might have the upper hand in numbers, but we have something they don't, the element of surprise. The global resistance, as Robert and his team prepared to leave the Vurox fortress, they made a critical decision. The first step was to call in their allies from across the globe. Using the network of underground channels they had established, they broadcasted their victory to the world, making sure every resistance cell knew that the leadership of the Vurox had been destroyed. It was a risky move. The Vurox were quick to adapt, and if they found out about the coordinated communication, it could expose their position. But the risk paid off. The message spread like wildfire. Human beings, once cowering under the iron fist of the Vurox, now saw hope. The resistance grew exponentially in the following days, drawing in people from all corners of the globe. It wasn't just soldiers and fighters who joined the cause. Farmers, engineers, doctors, teachers, and children. The world united, ready to take back what had been stolen from them. As they regrouped with allies, Robert felt the weight of their newfound responsibility. It was no longer just about survival. It was about reuniting humanity, every nation, every community, every individual, under a common cause. The Vurox had no idea what was coming. We need to build an army, Greg said. We have the momentum now, but we need more people, more resources. And more knowledge, Sarah added. We've learned so much from our victories. We know their systems, their tactics. We can use their own technology against them. Robert's mind churned with ideas. They had what they needed, the element of surprise, intelligence, and most importantly, a united front. The Vurox had underestimated humanity, and now the tables had turned. The final phase, as the weeks passed, the global resistance gathered steam. Forces from every nation, once divided by borders, united under one banner, the fight for freedom. The first wave of coordinated attacks began. Across the globe, resistance cells hit Vurox supply depots, took down their communication towers, sabotaged their weapon manufacturing plants, and freed thousands of enslaved humans. The Vurox retaliated, but they were disorganized, scattered. Their once feared leadership had crumbled, and they no longer had the tight-knit command structure they once relied upon. With each victory, humanity's confidence grew. The more Vurox forces they wiped out, the more they learned about their enemies' weaknesses. Robert, Sarah, and Greg continued to lead their mission from the front lines. They had become symbols of hope, figures that the world looked to for guidance. But the pressure was relentless. Every victory was tempered by the constant threat of Vurox counterattacks, and the resistance knew that there would be no real peace until the Vurox were gone for good. In the final stages of the war, Robert led a daring strike against the last remaining Vurox fortress, a massive space station orbiting Earth. It was their final bastion of control, and taking it down would ensure that the Vrox would never return. The battle was fierce, with waves of Vrox ships clashing against the united human fleet. But this time, humanity had something the Vrox didn't: the will to fight, to win. Every resistance cell, every soldier, and every civilian who had fought for their freedom now stood together. As Robert and his team infiltrated the space station, they faced one last hurdle: the core of the Vrox war machine, a massive generator that powered the entire station. Destroying it would end the Vrox's ability to wage war on Earth, but the station's security was impenetrable. It was then that Robert realized something crucial. The Vrox weren't just powerful because of their technology. They were powerful because of their fear. Fear of humanity's resilience. Fear of what would happen if Earth ever fought back. But now, Robert knew something the Vrox didn't. Humanity wasn't afraid anymore. With a final push, the resistance breached the station's defenses, detonating explosives that would cripple the Vrox's power supply. As the countdown ticked down, Robert looked out at the stars, feeling a strange mix of fear and triumph. They had won. The Vrox had underestimated humanity, and now, humanity had risen from the ashes. Epilogue: the rise of a new dawn in the years that followed the fall of the Vrox. Earth slowly began to rebuild. The scars of war remained, but they were reminders of the strength that humanity had shown in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Robert, Sarah, and Greg became the leaders of the new world, a world united in peace and strength. The Yao resistance became the foundation of a global government that prioritized unity, knowledge, and compassion over division and war. No longer would humanity stand divided. The war was over, the Vrox were gone, and humanity, against all odds, had triumphed.